Hello there everyone, welcome back, and today we're taking a look at... That's the first it's ever happened. I've knocked the light filter off my camera. Right. This, as I was saying, is a Walmart toilet paper skid shot blaster. Or rather, a modified version of it. Now the standard version, if I'm actually able to gather all the pieces together, would look something like this. Now, this would be what the standard version would look like, and it's relatively similar, except there's this contraption here on the side, which would be where you would put the toilet paper roll. Then up here would be the area where you would sort of have the water reservoir you'd filled up. Then this is the barrel that you would shoot the toilet paper projectile out of. So in effect, it's sort of like a repeating spit wad blaster. Just an interesting concept and probably deserving of its own video if I could actually manage to do something like that, but it's kind of hard to review a water blaster when you're in a room like this, because, you know, it would require quite a lot of cleanup. But I digress. I decided to modify it because I thought that since I already had all the darts I needed, since I already have all the Nerf darts, and since toilet paper is kind of, I don't know, not expensive, but, yeah, with all the shortages going on and everything, I figured it would probably be best for me to just use the darts that I already have as opposed to using toilet paper. So that's what I've done, and this is what I created. Now, it's a relatively simple mod. All the hardest part that involves was actually taking off the extra pieces, this here and all the other pieces, which did take a bit of time because some of the parts I had to unscrew the blaster for, and I subsequently lost a few of those, which that was fun trying to pick them up, but I digress. The barrel here is actually the only part that's been added to the blaster, and it's a relatively simple modification. It's a 17/32 inch diameter brass tube, which is a length. I didn't actually bother to measure the actual length of it, since it's just length I happen to have. But yeah, so I mean, if you wanted to blaster fire a bit harder, you could probably make the barrel a bit longer, but this is the length I ended up going for. It's a reasonable enough blaster. The ergonomics are decent. The grip is fine. It's not brilliant. The trigger pull's a bit heavy, but otherwise it's relatively standard to any of those Nerf blasters that you will find on the Amazon or in any of the stores that you go to. But what drew me to actually making this into a dart blaster was this massive plunger tube here, which for this blaster, for instance, this disruptor, the plunger tube on this is only about that big or so, which that is quite a bit smaller than this, which means that this has the potential to be quite powerful, which, I mean, if I actually bothered to put in a good seal on this, and I bothered to actually calibrate the barrel length, you could probably get 80 to 90 feet per second, maybe up to 100 if you're good at that sort of thing. But since I'm not, I just decided to go for a relatively simple seal. I glued on some, paper towels just to create a rudimentary seal, because that's better than just having the brass barrel just flopping around. But anyways, it's a muzzle-loading blaster, which that means that it doesn't have a great rate of fire, but its bolt action is actually proper bolt action as opposed to something like a long shot or long strike where it's just you pull back and then you fire. This, you actually have to aim it down to fire, because if you try to have it aimed up, you won't fire. I mean, you can see me pulling the trigger. It doesn't do anything, but turn it down, and it'll fire. Which, that is something that's actually pretty unique for a actual blaster like this. Nerf, let's see, the Ultra Pharaoh has something similar to this, but this is one of the only Nerf blasters that I've actually ever seen that actually functions as a proper bolt action, which is quite unusual for this. It's also unusual the fact that the plunger rod, or the bolt, actually is partially exposed. If I were to pull it back all the way, you would see that you can actually see the exposed plunger rod there, which is quite unusual for blasters, since with most blasters the bolt is fully enclosed, which does mean that dirt and grime can potentially get into there, but since it's closed when you actually close it, which should be most of the time when you have the bolt closed, that shouldn't affect the actual performance of the blaster too much, which is a good thing. And as for the actual performance, it isn't brilliant because the relatively poor seal and the fact that the barrel length's not calibrated terribly well, but I will give a brief demonstration of it, in which I'll be using Adventure Force waffle darts because they're better than Elite darts. So, being a muzzle loader and a single shooter, let's begin. Not a whole lot special about the performance itself. It fires about 60 feet per second, so a bit below the Nerf average, but not terrible either. It's usable in the Nerf war, though it's not really something that you're going to actually use in actual Nerf war, but it's fun enough for plinking. And if you use the right darts, it's actually relatively accurate. Of course, that does typically depend on the dart, not on the blaster so much. Even with the uncalibrated barrel and the poor seal, it does get decent enough performance, which is always a good thing to see, and something that could potentially be improved on in the future. Right, so not a whole lot to comment on there. It's a single shot muzzle loading bolt action blaster, so rate of fire is not exactly its forte, and it's not exactly blaster that you're going to be running into a Nerf battle with. That's not really what it's made for. Even in its original design as a toilet paper blaster, it's not really what it was designed for, but it is a fun enough blaster, and if you happen to have a whole bunch of extra darts lying around and you don't really want to use toilet paper, it is a fun enough mod, and it's relatively easy because all you just need is a 17/32 inch diameter length of brass tubing and you're good to go. You just need that and a good seal, and that's pretty much all you really need for it. Though it is notable that here on the top there is actually a hole, because that is where this goes, the water reservoir. But when you don't have the contraption with the toilet paper and with the water, with all that, you don't really need that. All you really need is the bolt, the plunger, and the catch. And of course a trigger and the barrel, but you don't need any of the extra mechanical bits that are up here. So that hole is something that dirt and dust could get into. What I found as a good seal is actually a Nerf rival round. So if you actually poke it down a bit, not too much, but about halfway, it actually forms a pretty good seal. which is quite unusual, but overall that is something that does help to improve the performance, or, well, at least help to prevent it from getting ruined by dust and dirt, because that's the bane of a Nerf blaster's existence. Because then that means that you have to open it up and clean it, and yeah, that's not exactly terribly fun. You don't buy a Nerf blaster to clean it, you buy it to have fun with it. But anyways, there's not a whole lot else left to go over. It's interesting blaster, not really war practical, but it's fun enough, and there's always room for improvement with it. It's a sort of blaster you can tinker with and improve on over time, and I mean, there's not a whole lot of upgrade potential in terms of the plunger tube, because the other screws here, that this thing is, there's a seal here that you can't take off fully with screws, so that does require, I mean, you could theoretically get it off if you had the proper tools, but even then, even if you did that and put in a stronger spring, that might end up ruining the seal. That's even if you have the proper tools, so it's not really worth it, especially for me, but it's always something to look into. And overall, that's pretty much it for today, so I hope you have a good day, everybody.